this video, I'm going to introduce you to some of the tools in this toolbar in online Google SketchUp, how to resize forms, move objects, and make components. So your first step would be making a new tab, finding your apps toolbar, scrolling down to the bottom, choosing Google SketchUp for Schools, and that will take a little while to load, and it'll open up to your home screen, and you'll be able to choose to make a new file. Please make sure that you save that and you give it a name. I would name it Introduction, and you're going to save it in your Google Drive. Once you've done that, you will have a space that looks a little bit similar to mine, this little environment. I've clicked O to get my orbit tool. There is a pan tool as well, which I use H, my hand tool, H on my keyboard to get to, and there is a zoom tool here. This one will be helpful once you get like a lot of things in your environment and you want to get an overview. This one here, the zoom out to your extents, and this means you can draw up a window that you want to zoom into. So a few little tools here in terms of navigating. I am using a mouse, so I am using my little scroll button, clicking it down to be able to get my my orbit, and if I click shift, I can get my hand tool or pan and scroll up and down to get my zoom. So we are going to be drawing some forms, some basic forms today, using our selection tool, which is using the spacebar, the R on our keyboard to get the rectangle tool, which you will see here. We also have lots of other shapes, and another quick shortcut is C for circle. Okay, it will draw from the center out, and we really need to be working with making forms considering their size. So do a quick check of your file that it is in millimeters and whole numbers, so that you can be working in measurements that you know and understand. Once you have drawn out a rectangle and a circle, you can have a go with the push-pull tool. You may have had a go with this already. It allows you to extend a surface into a 3D form. And again, you can use this distance tool down the bottom by not selecting a second time, rather just only selecting once to decide the direction in which the object will be formed, and then you can enter in the distance or the height in which that third dimension of the form. So the push-pull tool is just the P, shortcut P, and if you're trying to draw something that is a bit more unusual form, you can use your line tool to construct. I'm kind of making things up here to construct the form push-pull, and let's say we've got something like that. Okay, so make about 5 different forms so that we can have a play around and construct. One thing I definitely want you to do with your rectangle tool is to be entering in some different dimensions, using that comma in between. Don't drag your mouse around because it will change your dimensions. Just click once. So let me start again. Click once, drag in the direction in which you want your rectangle to be drawn. Let your mouse sit there, enter in some distances, and there we go. You get your form, and you are able to decide on how big it will be. So we've got 3, 4, 5 different forms here. Again, working with that distance tool to create some different elements, which then we could play around with moving some of the elements. Now, when you are moving the objects, you are going to use, of course, the Move tool. Quick shortcut key is the M, but you will find that underneath here, where you can also rotate and scale some forms, which we will do in a moment. Actually, let's start with the Scale tool. So as we select an object, I want you to drag a window all the way around one form. You've got to be careful though that you don't select something that is behind the form. So make sure that your viewpoint allows you to just select or drag over a window that will select all the edges and surfaces within that rectangle. So if we want to scale the form, I would press the shortcut S, and that allows you to either uniformly make the object larger or smaller with these diagonal options. Okay, that one or that one. Or you could be dragging out the object higher or wider or longer. Okay, so you've got those options. Or you can change the scale entirely. Now you can see down in the bottom corner, I again have an option to decide that it's going to be twice the size. Okay, so that was the original size, that was the original height and width, and now it's gone double that size. So you can play around with scaling each of your forms so that you either have just played around with the height or the depth or the width. So you've got 5 new forms, considering how you select your objects and you use your panning or your orbit tool to make sure that you are viewing the form in a way that you can select it without selecting the other objects. So if we want to move an object, again we need to select it, and we click the M tool, or we find the arrows, and we are going to choose a point on the object. Now the easiest thing is to choose an end point, because then it's far more accurate that we can visually find somewhere else that we want to move it to. If we just move it in like the distance, it's very hard for us to control what that distance is because we have got very little markers, few markers in this environment to know really where we are moving it to. So the best option is to mark out where you want it to go. It might be by drawing a line so that you can mark out or have a point in which that node or that corner, the end point of your object is going to go. So this end point might go to, I might have to change my view. And I might even have to move it oh, it's joined it. Don't worry, don't mind me, just having not technical difficulties, but just thinking about how I want to distinguish or move this element. Now what's happened is that it's stuck to it. It's like a magnet. So once an object has been moved and is connected with another line or surface, they are merged. Okay, they are connected like a really strong magnet, and we can't remove them from one another unless we start to group our objects. Now, you can right click on what you've selected and you can make it a group. And what will happen now, if I want to move it, I can choose, let's say, that point there, and I can move it down to this other end of the line. It's really not liking my line, but I have to just be patient and get that feedback from my screen telling me that I have got the endpoint, and I'm able to move it along that line at its different either ends or midpoint. Yeah, so you can move an entire object, or you can select an edge and you can move that. So let's say I want to move that edge. I can move it way out to the distance, but again, I don't have much control over where that goes. I had no idea that I was making that long. It looked much shorter from this perspective, okay? I looked like I was just moving it a little bit to the right. So if I undo that and have a little bit more control, I can use the tape measure and measure out, let's say, a meter, 1,000 millimeters, and maybe, let's say, 400 millimeters up. So I've decided on a point that I'm going to move that edge to. So I'm using my spacebar and moving that up to that point, and here we go. I've got a lot more control. I knew exactly where that was going to go. Okay, so you can adjust a shape or a form by moving just one edge rather than just moving the entire form, and that's can be a little tricky. The trouble with a cylinder is that it is probably not going to slide across very nicely. If you double click a surface, it will also select all the edges around it. Okay, so that's a good little hack. So this is only going to want to move up into it. Very similar to the push-pull tool. It's all just a heads up. But with a surface, you can move that backwards and forwards any direction you like. But again, if you want something that's quite specific, you're going to have to mark out where you want that to move. You can see that the distance is changing in my little feedback on the screen. It's telling me how far I'm moving that point on the surface, but I don't have much control in which direction. I'm kind of generally guessing what that outcome would be. Okay, it's giving me that I'm moving it up on the blue axis, so I'm just moving it up vertically, which might be quite interesting. But as we're designing, we will probably want to be a bit more intentional when creating forms. So we've tried out the move tool. We understand that we can group a set of surfaces and edges, a form, and we can also make repeating geometry. So let's say I'm making a chair with lots of hexagon legs. I am able to repeat a object. I could repeat a group. I could just copy and paste. But the nice thing about this component tool is that I can then edit them all at the same time. So let me show you that. I'm going to select this entire object, and I'm going to right click and make a component. Okay, I'm going to call this a leg as an example. I don't need to worry about these elements for now, and I'm going to click OK. So now this is a leg. What I can do when I click move is I can also click option, and I'll be able to clone this form here. I can clone it as many times as I like, and then I can go in and edit it. So you can see I've got a little plus at the bottom of that symbol now. If I unclick it, it keeps going. So that's a normal move tool. I click the option and it has now got a plus. So I can choose a point, and voila, I have now got a second leg. I'm going to Click Option again. Make sure it's matching or working with the axes so that they're all in line. Click the Move tool Option, and I've got a 4th leg. So we've got 4 legs here, all working together. Now, you can see, I'm going to show you that now we can edit this. If I use my spacebar, double click, I am now in the edit mode. I am going to draw a rectangle on this, or I'm going to actually use the offset tool. There's a tool that you probably haven't seen yet. In the push-pull tool, there is an offset, and I can use this surface, and I'm going to draw a border essentially inside it, and then push-pull, I'm going to set it back. Now you're seeing the magic of, now I'm editing all of the same, it's editing the clones of this original, which is a lovely tool to be able to use when you are making multiple geometry and you're wanting something to kind of be repeated across a set of forms. So that is a tool that you want to use a lot. And the other nice thing is that what will happen is if I move this tool, this object, and I put it here, it's not going to magnetically stick to the other one. They're going to be separate. They're not going to join to one another like the line did with the hexagon before, when it wasn't a separate group in itself. Okay, so we have tried out the rectangle tool, we've drawn circles, we have even drawn hexagons, we have used the push-pull tool today and the offset tool, we've used the move tool and the scale tool to change the form and location of things, we've used the tape measure to mark out a location in the environment, we've orbited, we have used the pan tool to navigate around. We haven't used the eraser, but I think that you will figure that one out yourself. And this move tool is definitely one to get familiar with, and reading all the feedback that you get on the screen when trying to move something around, whether it be an edge or a surface. Okay, all the best with playing around with these different tools so you can get familiar with it, so when you want to make something, you know how to utilize these in your own modeling.